Welcome to our 8th Ray Bradbury Storytelling Festival. For 8 years, Waukegan Public Library has produced this festival honoring Waukegan's favorite literary genius. There are several literary geniuses from Waukegan. This is the favorite one. Here in this great shrine to the arts, the Genesee Theater. The fact that this was built and then rebuilt after it was closed and condemned is a kind of a Don Quixote kind of story, and we have that story later tonight. It's a special year. In the year 2013, the Waukegan Public Library received the National Medal of Honor in Washington, D.C., was invited to the White House to receive this honor, given to 5 out of 9,000 libraries in America. And the criteria was a library that makes a difference. And one way that this wonderful library system makes a difference is by honoring Ray Bradbury and by honoring language and words and books. In addition, this year was the year that the library took possession of Ray Bradbury's personal effects, which were given to the library in Bradbury's will. He loved Waukegan. He would love all of you here at this moment, thinking about books and thinking about him. His papers are at the University, Indiana University at Indianapolis, the Ray Bradbury Center there. But his personal effects, valued at $480,000, have been left to the Waukegan Public Library. I'd be very interested in seeing some of those someday, and you undoubtedly will. Because I've learned a little bit about Ray. For instance, every year of his life until he was 92 years old, right up to his death, every Christmas he asked for toys. Apparently some rooms were filled with stuffed animals. And of course all kinds of original Disney drawings and things like that from his prolific career. But the director of the library, of the Waukegan Library, Richard Lee, who I want you to give a big hand to when he steps out here, because a lot of this is under his leadership. He went with his daughter Raina to LA this last year, I guess with a big moving van, and went through Ray's house and spent a lot of time with Ray's daughter, and they brought a lot of that stuff back. And Richard took pictures, and he's going to show you some of those slides now. So we're going to take you to Ray Bradbury's home to look at some of Ray Bradbury's personal effects, and our guide on this journey will be Executive Director of the Waukegan Public Library, Richard Lee. Richard, please come out and take a bow.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Welcome. And Jim said this is our 8th annual Storytelling Festival. I can't believe it's 8 years already. But I would like to show you a little bit about the journey to LA and back. So if we can start that. Or not. There we go. Quick, bring in a storyteller. We lost Ray Bradbury June 5th, 2012. Shortly after we lost Ray, I was contacted by his attorney, and who told me that we were going to get all the books and manuscripts that Ray did not author. This is his home in Cheviot Hills, which is just west of Santa Monica and just north of Culver City. They purchased the house, Maggie and him, in 1958, just after they had their 4th daughter, Alexandra. They tell me this is the typical Hollywood starter home. I wouldn't know what a typical Hollywood starter home is. I have the typical starter Waukegan home. They moved in Thanksgiving Day, 1958. Maggie thought she didn't have to cook a turkey. They had 2 moving vans come. One van had their furniture and clothing. The other van had Ray's stuff. I guess they played badminton at night a lot too, according to Sam Weller's book, The Bradbury Chronicles. Also in that book that tells about there was a gardener who was up cleaning the gutters and happened to see a shuttlecock from a badminton game that had gone up on a roof and was washed down in there. And Ray came out and said, "Return it to its nest, and it's supposed to still be there." This is the living room, and this portrait is one that we have that came back with a shipment. It'll be down on the lower level near the Bradbury room once we get it hung. Everywhere you looked, there were books. Everywhere you looked, there were toys. This is one of the bedrooms. There was a shower stall off of one of the bedrooms on the upper level, and he had shelves in there too that were just full of books. And yes, those are ours now. Many of the books that accompanied us here were books given to him by other authors. Back in that time when Edgar Rice Burroughs was writing the Tarzan novels, he would, if a new novel came out, he would write in it, "To Ray, I hope you enjoy this." Those are now in our collection as well. He also has a lot of original Disney cells. What the value is, I'm not sure, but all the artwork was just appraised as well. This is from the office in the basement. There was a basement, and then there was a sub-basement that had a dirt floor. The file cabinet over here said manuscripts and short stories unpublished. And I opened those up and I thought, how easy would it be for me to put my name on that and submit those? Again, this is all in the basement. We have this poster as well from Something Wicked This Way Comes. All the pulps and serials that Ray wrote for. Those are in Indiana University. And there's his typewriter right there. We have that typewriter as well. That's the 5th one that he used for the last 2 decades of his life. I'm not sure, but I think it's an IBM Selectric. That's me with John Eller, who is the executive director from the Indiana University's Center for Ray Bradbury Studies. Those are all ours too. This is from the garage, so those are all overstocks that he has. 100 of you have some of these that were on the shelves just to the right over here, the Fahrenheit 451s. This is us in the living room again. This is Alexandra Bradbury in the red over there, John Eller again, Marcia Lumetta, who was the executor of the estate. Some of the stock that went to Indiana University. The script that John Huston had him write for Moby Dick when he sent him over to Ireland. We have this. Ray did a lot with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at NASA, the Mariner project with all the Mars stuff, or Viking, excuse me. Yeah, this is his Mars driver's license. We have this as well. And a few bottles of dandelion wine. It's probably dandelion vinegar now. These were foreign language editions in the sub-basement where they had the dirt floor. Some of them are in kind of poor shape, but we took them all anyways. Yeah, invaluable stuff. I mean, corrections to short stories and novels. This is Don Albright, Ray's bibliographer and archivist, and John Eller and myself in the garage. And these two could go on and on about stories. This is Rena Moore, our archivist and exhibits person with Alexandra, Ray's youngest daughter. Kind of looks like her father. We started packing up last Thursday, a week ago Thursday. There was 3 packers. They worked from 9 till 6. The truck left on Thursday to Indiana University. Ours arrived Friday morning at 8 a.m. and we started loading that with 3 people. Three guys, 3 hours, 85 degrees temperature. This is the basement where the office was. It's all been taken away to Indianapolis, where they're going to recreate his office. The empty shelves now, and the garage shelves. This is packing our 53-foot truck. The shelves are bare. One of the bedrooms upstairs. Rena and myself, just before the truck headed out. And the garage is empty. The truck left 6 days later. It was in Waukegan, where it was 28 degrees. No one really wanted to leave, and every time Alexandra said she was going to go downstairs, she started tearing up a little bit. It was like Dad was leaving. Here's the truck arriving in Waukegan, and a different crew getting ready to unload. And this is our 10 by 20 controlled, or temperature controlled storage space. That's just full. There's over 500 1.5 cubic foot boxes. the weight officially was 19,300 pounds. So those are all out there, not too far from us, up by Grand and Green Bay. We're going to get to them as soon as we can. As Jim said, it was valued about $481,000. I know there's some invaluable things in there. Some things will be given away. Some will be added to the collection. Bear with us with your patience, because there's a lot of stuff over there, and we're still running the library, but we hope to get it out just as soon as we can and make some permanent exhibits as well. So thank you for your patience. We're going to go on with the show.
And now, a little bit more of Ray.
I suppose you wonder why I've called you all here. I want to identify myself. I'm Ray Bradbury, but you're very curious, aren't you, to find out how I fell in love with books. I learned to read when I was 3 years old. I loved comic strips. I loved the cartoons on Sunday, and I got a book of fairy tales when I was 5 years old, and I fell in love with reading. And when I was 6, I saw a film on dinosaurs, and dinosaurs filled my life. A thing that begins when you're 3 and 6 and 10 and 12 wind up in your fictions when you're in your 30s. The things that you do should be things that you love, and things that you love should be things that you do. I was 7 years old when I went to the library for the first time, and I was hoping to find books about the Land of Oz by L. Frank Baum and Tarzan by Edgar Rice Burroughs. That was a great adventure. And I'd open the door of the library and I'd look in, and all those people were waiting for me in there. You see, libraries is people. People are waiting in there. Thousands of people who wrote the books. My greatest influences are John Steinbeck. I read The Grapes of Wrath when I was 19 years old. So you find the author who can lead you through the dark. And Shakespeare starred me there, and Hamlet starred me there, and Richard III, and Emily Dickinson led the way for me, and Edgar Allan Poe said, "This way, here's the light." That's what a library is. So you go into the library and discover yourself. Long at night when I was 12 years old, and I looked at the planet Mars, and I said, "Take me home." And the planet Mars took me home. I never came back. So I've written every day. In the last 75 years, I've never stopped writing. We should learn from history about the destruction of books. When I was 15 years old, Hitler burned books in the streets of Berlin. So I learned then how dangerous it all was. Because if you didn't have books and the ability to read, you couldn't be part of any civilization. You couldn't be part of a democracy. If you know how to read, you have a complete education about life, then you know how to vote within a democracy. But if you don't know how to read, you don't know how to decide. That's the great thing about our country, is we are a democracy of readers, and we should keep it that way. I published the first version of Fahrenheit in February 1951. When I moved into LA with my family, I had 2 daughters. I needed an office because my daughters were very loud and wonderful and lovely, but I had no money for an office. I was wandering around up at UCLA, and I heard typing in a room down in the basement. And I went down to the basement, and I found a room that had 12 typewriters in it. I could rent a typewriter for 10 cents a half hour. So I said, my God, this is my office. Doesn't matter, I was surrounded by students. I got a bag of dimes. I moved into the typing room in the basement of the library, and I spent $9 and $9.80, and I wrote Fahrenheit 451. So you see, what a place for Fahrenheit 451 to be written in a library of all places where it wasn't being burned. So I made a contract with Valentine, and I went to the library again, with the typing in the typing room, and I added 25,000 words. How did I do that? I got the characters to come to me. Montag came and said, do you know who I am completely? I said, no. I said, tell me. And the fire chief came to me, and he told me about his prior life. I said to the fire chief, why did you burn books? And he told me. And Clarice McClellan came, who was a 16-year-old girl who was in love with books and libraries and life. Clarice is me. Clarice McClellan is Ray Bradbury, the young boy who fell in love with life. And Clarice is the essence of life and the essence of love. You see, all my characters write the book. I don't write the book. All these characters come to me and say, listen to me. And then I listen to them and I put it down and the book gets written. That's how I write, you see. All these lovers surround me and they love life and they tell me about it. At the center of my books is the gift of life. The reason why my books are popular because they know I'm a lover. When people touch my books, they are alive. So that's the gift I give to them, and I want them to carry them back and forth to the library. Books are smart and brilliant and wise. Love what you do and do what you love. Don't listen to anyone else who tells you not to do it. You do what you want, what you love. But imagination should be the center of your life. Fantasy at the center of your life. I'm going to have a t-shirt made. It says, stand at the top of the cliff and jump off and build your wings on the way down. We are all the sons and the daughters of time. So I thank the universe for making life on earth and allowing me to come alive here. I want a close-up of the cat now.
Well, as difficult and absurd as it might seem to follow Ray Bradbury with more words, that's what we'll do tonight, and I think he would approve. Ray hated censorship. He was honest to a fault. I saw the Moby Dick script up there. One of my favorite stories, some of you may have heard it, is after 451 was published and was getting quite an acclaim, he attracted the attention of John Huston, the famous director. And Huston was all set to film Moby Dick in Ireland with Gregory Peck as Captain Ahab. And he called up Ray Bradbury and said, Mr. Bradbury, are you busy the next few months? And he said, no, Mr. Huston, I'm not. And John Huston said, well, I'd like you to come to Ireland and write the screenplay for Moby Dick. I've contracted with Gregory Peck to play Captain Ahab. And Ray Bradbury said, well, to tell you the truth, Mr. Houston, I've never been able to get through the goddamn thing. I don't feel so bad now. But he took another swing at it, and he fell in love with Moby Dick, and he went to Ireland, and he wrote the screenplay. During the MacArthur era, he was at a Screen Guild meeting in Hollywood when they were deciding what to do, whether to stand firm or name names. And the Hollywood Screen Actors Guild decided to name names. And Ray Bradbury got up, said he's never been so ashamed of them in his life, told them all to go to hell, and never came back. In 451, he imagines a dystopia, a time in the future when books are burned. In fact, that job is ironically given to the fire departments, who are no longer needed because all the houses are fireproof because technology has soared in this era. Things you will hardly believe in this world of Ray Bradbury's. People had little clamshell-like earphones in their ears, both ears, almost all the time. Hardly spent time talking to each other. Can you imagine that? People had big screens on their walls. One wall would be almost all screens, and there would be people there talking to you all day long, telling you not only the news, but stories, different kinds of life stories, and giving you advice. If you were rich, you had 2 screens, sometimes 3 or 4 screens. It was a status symbol. And you drew your drapes down so it would be dark, so the colors and the fireworks and the wall screens could be even more impactful. Well, Montag, who Ray mentioned, is the main character in Fahrenheit 451. And Fahrenheit 451 is the temperature at which book paper burns. And in that story, there's a lot of tragedy, there's a lot of terror, but there's a lot of hope. Because Ray maintained and held out hope for the human race. Because toward the end of the story, the book people learn the books. Each person designated to learn a book, to remember a story, and to preserve the story in that way. So I think Ray would appreciate us being here tonight, because in some ways, you'll be meeting some of the book people who will be telling the stories right out of their heads and out of their hearts, stories told by heart. And in some ways, the 8 years we've done this festival, we have honored Ray Bradbury, the literary giant and the prolific writer of books. He said at the age of 20, he discovered that he could get up, sit at the typewriter, start free associating, and have a story roughed out by noon. And he said he did that almost every day of his life for 90 years. He gave great inspiration to other writers. He says, you want to learn to write? Write a story a week. After 52 weeks, you'll know a lot about yourself. You won't want to show most of them to anybody, but you'll know a lot about yourself as a writer. So over the last 7 years, we have always told at least one Bradbury story. Last year, all of them in honor of his passing. And then we would tell other literary stories as well. But this year, there's an old folk saying that a story is so often an acting out of a ritual. Or rather, a story is a telling of a ritual, and a ritual is an acting out of a story. So tonight, we are acting out 451, because we're telling that story. And that's what this festival has been about for 8 years, is book people telling the stories, as they did in 451, but this year we're recognizing it. You open the page to that novel, his masterpiece, and this is the first scene. It was a special pleasure to see things blackened and eaten and changed. Montag, he held the brass nozzle in his fist, and with the great python spewing venomous kerosene on the world, his hands like some amazing conductor, playing the symphonies of blazes and burning, bringing down the tattered, charred ruins of history. The blood pounding in his head, his silver hat with the symbolic numbers 4, 5, 1, his eyes blazing orange, anticipating what was to come next. He flicked the igniter. The house jumped in a surge of flame, painting the night sky yellow and red and black. He strode into a swarm of fireflies while the pigeon-winged books flapped and died on the front porch and the yard of the house. After the fire, Montag returned to the firehouse. He showered upstairs luxuriously, a smile on his face. The smile was almost always there. He was doing the good work, fighting the good fight, keeping the world at peace. Books were confusing. The imagination was dangerous, Captain Beatty told him. Don't give a man 2 political ideas. Give him one. Better yet, give him none. Don't let him know about war. Give him sports, lots of sports, super sports. Give him entertainment, fast cars. Let him go to the fun parks. Headlines, only headlines. Give them lots of facts, lots of facts. They'll think they're smart if you fill their brain with facts. Give them recreation. Give them some magazines. Leave the 3-dimensional sex magazines, of course. But lots of fun and recreation and drugs and sex. Good, solid entertainment. That's what Captain said. Montag was up for a promotion. He knew everything that Captain Beatty said. In his street clothes now, he headed for the hole, and he dropped down it, taking his hands out of his pocket just in time to grip the brass pole and land like a feather on the concrete below. He walked into the night. He stepped into the air-cushioned subway tube that took him underground across town and let him out in a puff of warm air to a white tile escalator that took him up to his suburb. On the quiet street now, the trees letting down their dry autumn rain, he had an uneasy feeling. And it had that feeling several times that week, as if he were not alone on his walk down that street to home, as if he would pass a particular area and the temperature would raise just a bit from a body, a human having been there and then disappeared at an instant or disappeared into a shadow, dissolving as Montag walked towards it. But this night, he turned the corner, and up ahead, there were leaves swirling around the feet of a young girl walking toward him. The leaves obscuring her feet, it looked as if she was attached to the walk, and the wind and the leaves were moving her along, her head down, watching her feet. She started, realizing there was a man standing in front of her. But then her dark eyes became shiny and liquid and smiling, as if he had said something amazing when all he had said was, hello. You must be the fireman, she said. Well, did you notice the fire truck, the great salamander, we call it, the salamander with kerosene in its belly? Oh, no, I would have known you with my eyes closed. Yeah, it's the kerosene, Montag said. You really never can wash it off. I know, she said. How long have you been a fireman? Oh, since I was 20, 10 years now. It's a good living, it's a good job, we do good work. Burn Malay on Monday, Whitman on Wednesday, Faulkner on Friday, burn them to ashes and burn the ashes. That's what Captain Beatty says. It's our slogan. Oh, she said. Would you like to walk me home? Well, certainly. Do you ever look at the moon? Sometimes I watch the moon all night, she said. Montag realized he had not looked at the moon in years. How old are you? I'm 17 and I'm crazy. My uncle says they go together. But you know, I get crazy ideas. I have time for crazy ideas. I don't spend much time looking at the screens on the wall. It's just my uncle, my mother, my father, and we don't have any screens. Is it true that houses did not used to be fireproofed and the fire departments used to put out the fires? No, he laughed. Why do you laugh when I ask you questions that aren't funny? Well, I don't know. Why do you answer before you think about what I asked you? Well, you are an odd duck, and having no respect for this, he pointed to the 4, 5, 1. Oh, of course I do, she said. I'm sorry. I just love to listen to people. My uncle says that I have a fierce curiosity and it gets me in trouble sometimes. My house is right here. We're practically neighbors, said Montag. Yes, you can see your house and ours. Why are there so many lights? Montag had never seen a house so lit up because all the houses in the neighborhood were dark, the drapes drawn so that the screens would be more vital and colorful. We talk, she said, we talk late into the night, almost every night. What do you talk about? Asked Montag, but it was too late. She was running toward the house. He laughed nervously, but she stopped right by the door and she turned. She said, are you happy? Am I happy? But it was too late. She was in the house, the door closing gently. What an odd conversation. He was starting to get a headache. He remembered having one other such odd conversation in his life last summer. An old English professor, Faber. He had met him in a park. Faber had tried to hide something in his pocket when he saw Montag the fireman. But Montag was gentle. He just sat and he listened. He had lost his job, Faber had. He was an English professor. He had lost his job finally when he only had one student sign up for Shakespeare at Princeton. Yes, he said Princeton now is a nuclear engineering college. But I still remember the days when we had the books. We had wonderful books. You know, if you smell a book, it smells like nutmeg or cinnamon or some spice from a foreign land. I wonder what Ray's house smelled like. Montag couldn't take his ear off of Faber's stories. Yes, Faber and this crazy 17-year-old girl. When he got to his house, Montag touched the door. The glove sensor recognized him and the door opened. It was cold in his house and dark. He checked in on Mildred, his wife. She was asleep with the seashells in her ears, listening to the day's events and proverbs and always the sound of the ocean that she slept with. Made it difficult to talk in bed. Then he went and sat by the window. He looked out. He could see Clarice's house still lit up and them sitting around the table. I wonder what they're talking about, he thought. And then he remembered Faber, how interesting that old man had been. And then he looked at the wall. There was an air conditioning grate. And Montag thought about what was staring back at him behind that grate, what he had hidden back in there. He stood up, he walked across the kitchen, he pushed a chair against that wall, he stepped up onto the chair, he removed the grate, he reached back and he took out a book. Happened to be a Bible. He reached back in, he took out a small box. He opened that box, and in that box was something about the size of a lima bean, light green in color. Faber had given it to him. A transmitter, Faber said. You put this in your ear and you can hear me and I can hear you. Montag said we're not allowed to wear things like that, just the clamshells for the radio and the seashore and the government announcements. Faber nodded. I want you to have it. And he had taken it. He put it back in the box, climbed back in the chair and put the box back in the vent and also the book. And he closed it up. He had trouble sleeping that night. The next day at the fire department, when he got to work, he didn't go right up the pole. The pole worked both ways in that futuristic world. He went back down a corridor, and there in a kennel was the mechanical hound. Captain Beatty said it was some kind of an engineer's invention of some hound of the Baskerville of something that he had never heard of. It was off now. Looked like it was asleep. It was all springs and metal and electricity. It was programmed to the scent of a certain human being, and once it had that scent programmed into its olfactory canal, well, Captain Beatty said it was like a bullet that hit the target every time, in the middle, bullseye. Had a proboscis, and out of that a 4-inch needle that delivered the procaine, which was the numbing prelude to a death by devouring. The hound always fascinated Montag, and he looked a little bit closer, and suddenly, clink, the eyes opened. There were red, ruby, diamonds. Blue vapor came out of its nostril, and it growled. Montag jumped back. It was supposed to be off. It growled again. Montag turned, ran, grabbed the pole, and up he went. He got up to the top, and the men and the captain were playing cards. Montag, you look like you've seen a ghost. The hound growled at me. Impossible. It's only programmed to do what we tell it. It growled at me twice. Well, said Captain Beatty, perhaps you have a guilty conscience. No, he said. He sat down, began playing cards. I wonder, said Montag, I heard someone say that there was a day when there was no protection for houses, and fire departments and firemen were needed to put out flames. They all laughed. Get the book, said Captain Beatty. They took out the history book. Here it is right here. The fire department, American Fire Department, founded in 1790 to burn the books of the king, to burn books against the colonial Americans. First fireman, Benjamin Franklin. He put the book away. They played cards some more. You look nervous, Montag, said Captain Beatty. Hard to concentrate. It's your hand. Montag kind of shook himself out of his reverie and his thoughts. There's a girl in our neighborhood. And I had a long talk with her last night, and today the house was closed up, and she's, yes, that family, said Beatty. Their problems, we've been following them ever since they lived in Chicago. There were several false alarms, but we never found any books. But that family, they poison her mind. A family, environment, heredity can undo a lot of what we do in school. She's a time bomb, always asking questions why. She's better off dead. Dead. He asked the family was relocated, but a report came in, I think. She was hit by one of the salamanders, one of the fire trucks coming back for a job. She's better off. Montag's head was spinning. He had trouble seeing the cards in front of him. And then something else happened. He heard the hound scratching downstairs. Montag, you look sick. Why don't you take the day off? Montag somehow found his way home. He opened the door. He walked in. He sat at the table. He looked across at Clarissa's house. It was boarded up. He took the chair. He slid it across. He climbed up. He opened the grate, took out the books, several of them, took out the box, took that small lima beam transmitter, and he put it in his ear. Montag, is that you? It was Faber. Yes, it's me. Montag, I'm glad you came. I gave you the transmitter. I took a chance. I thought you'd come back a friend or a fireman. I wasn't sure. I'm glad you're back. Why? Why did you put the transmitter in your ear? It was a girl. Yes, it's always a girl. No. She was like my daughter. She was alive. She's gone. She's gone. It's a fireman. I'm a fireman, Faber. You got to help me. Take it easy. I'll be there. You just keep me in your ear. I'll tell you what to do. I don't want to be told what to do. I want to think for myself. Great. You're doing it already. Be calm. It'll be all right. I'll be here. The next day, at the fire department, they were back at the card table. Big job today, said Beatty. Montag, I hope you're more alert than yesterday. It's a big job. Coming up soon. The alarm went off. All the firemen down the pole. Montag forgot his hat. Montag, come on, step up. He got back, he grabbed his helmet, down he went. Off went the salamander. Through the streets as it always did, sirens blaring, lights flashing, screech of tire around the corners. This time, Captain Beatty was driving. Determined, Captain Beatty, captain of the ship. They took the last corner and they stopped. And Montag looked up. It was his house. You brought it on yourself, Montag. Show us the books. We know you've got them. Several alarms have been turned in. Montag numbly walked up the walk. They followed him. The door opened. It was Mildred, his wife, with a suitcase. I can't take it. I have to save myself when she was gone. She turned me in? It was neighbors too, said Beatty. Wouldn't have mattered. They came to that kitchen. There were the books on the floor. Beatty handed Montag the flamethrower. I think you should do this, Montag. This was all you're doing. You were up for promotion. You were my best cadet. Now burn them. Montag took the flamethrower, aimed him at the books, and then turned toward the wall, and the screen enveloped in flame. No, not the screen, the books, Montag, the books. He turned the other side, another screen, a screen up in flames. The books, Montag. He burnt the books. That's right, Montag. That's the way we do it. That's the way a fireman should do it. And by the way, Montag, after this is all over, you're under arrest. Beatty cuffed him on the head. You were my best cadet. The transmitter fell on the floor. What's this? Beatty picked it up. I've seen one or two of these. Montag, there's two of you. There's a friend on the other end of this. We'll find him. We'll give him a welcoming just like we gave Clarice. He can join Clarice. No, said Montag. Beatty went up in a screaming ball of flame, writhing around on the floor. The other firemen dropped their flamethrowers and ran. Finally, Beatty curled up in kind of a tar-coated, insect-like fetal position. Montag ran. He picked up the transmitter first, he put it in his ear, and he ran, and he ran, and he ran, and he smelled it in the yard, the blue electricity. It was the Hound. The Hound was after him. The Hound was Captain Beatty's backup. Captain Beatty. More of that story in a few minutes. Thank you. Above all, Bradbury knew that people were afraid of imagination. That imagination was dangerous to power, dangerous to the element in our culture that somehow does not wish for democracy, does not see democracy as an end or a benefit. And this next story is about the imagination. And it's told by one of the book people, otherwise known as J. O'Callahan. And the story is Don Quixote. I rented 451 2 nights ago and watched it. We didn't know this when the whole process of putting together the show was begun over a year ago, or about a year ago. We didn't know it then, but as we've been watching the movie, I learned for the first time, in the first scene of the burning, in the movie, the first book they burn is Don Quixote. Because they feared nothing like they feared the imagination. Ray would be honored that Jay has come all the way from Marshall, Massachusetts to be here to tell Don Quixote. Ray loved the NASA program, the Jet Propulsion Lab in Los Angeles. J. O'Callahan was commissioned by NASA to tell their anniversary story for their 50 years. And it's a great meeting of imaginations and purpose in having J. O'Callahan here tonight to tell, from one of the book people, Don Quixote.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody. It's amazing to be at this festival. We had lunch with a lot of the people at the library today, and their commitment to this and making this happen is amazing. I live in Marshfield, Massachusetts, and that's the home of Daniel Webster. And if we could do the same thing, if we could have a festival around this great figure the way we've done here, it would be a wonderful thing. Tell historical stories, maybe. So tonight I'm going to tell a little of Don Quixote. And it's a story I'm personally attached to because of my daughter Laura. When Laura was in the 6th grade, 11 years old, Marshfield Middle School, she had to read Don Quixote, which is 900 pages. And I thought, well, maybe she'll like it because it's about imagination. And Laura was very imaginative, good student, but she felt that there was no room for imagination in the middle school. So Laura made room. She would dress with great style every day. She called it her costumes every day. She might wear my wife's vintage coat, tassels and wonderful buttons. Laura's grandmother had been an assistant buyer at the French shop at Filene's long ago. This is a great department store in Boston. So her grandmother would give her wonderful hats, some wild hats and scarves, and give her sweaters, dresses. And her grandfather had done a lot of acting, so he would give smoking jacket and vests and ties, and once a cape that he wore in a show. I gave Laura my pea jacket, and I think once she wore a wetsuit. But I think that was one time. But that's the way she insisted on bringing imagination, and I thought that was great, so maybe she likes Don Quixote. So I went up to her room, and Laura was sitting there with this fat book, Don Quixote. I said, Laura, how do you like it? She rolled her eyes. I said, you know, it's a classic. She said, then I hate classics. I said, Laura, what do you think of the central character? She said, Dad, he is a boring old man. Why do I have to read this? I said, that's the thing, Laura. Ha. He's old. Now this is written in the late 1500s, early 1600s, Shakespeare's time. And old, when you're 50 years old in those times, that's it. You're going to die soon. But this man, does he sit around waiting? No, Laura. He gets fired up the way you are. His imagination is so active, it brings him out into the world. Let me tell you a few episodes to get you going. She said, you may tell me one. All right, Laura, all right. Let's call this the books. All right, once upon a time, in the middle of Spain, La Mancha, in a village I will not name, there was a man, Quixote the Good. He was 50, he was long, he was lean, had a long face, often a gray face. Quixote the Good. He was worrying his housekeeper and his niece because during his leisure time, and all his time was leisure time, he was reading, but not just the day, the nights, reading. They peered in one day, he was asleep, and there were books all over the place. They were on the floor, and they were on the couch, and they were on the table, and books cost a fortune. And then he began to sell off his land to buy more of these books. These were books of chivalry and romance, and books of the great knights of ancient days. And his mind was filling with enchantments and battles and beautiful ladies and quarrels and giants. His imagination was such that he wandered through his house one day and he'd passed something hundreds of times, but he saw it. Armor that belonged to his great-grandfather. A suit of armor. He picked it up. It was rust-eaten. It was moldy. It was cold. He got his stable boy and put it on. And Don Quixote, that was in the back of his mind. Began to walk down the corridor. A cat ran out and he fell to the floor. And his niece ran out. What is it? Nothing. Help me up. And she ran off saying he's mad. Don Quixote, again he whispered. That would come back. something was changing in him, and he felt this armor. It fit. It fit. And it lifted his heart. He felt different. He felt, I would be a madman to stay here. I could go out into the world like the knights of old used to. I can go on adventures. I can bring some good to the world. He felt so different that he went out in his armor and looked at his horse, and the visor fell down, and his horse was a bony nag. But now he looked at his horse, and his horse looked as fine as the horse of Alexander the Great. He needed a name, a proper name. 4 days, and then he thought, Rosinante, a sonorous name. You are Rosinante, and I. Well, the name had come to him, but it didn't come back. 8 days, it did come back. I am Don Quixote. But not just Don Quixote. I will be famous, and so will all this around me. La Mancha, yes, Don Quixote of La Mancha. He was feeling far different than it ever felt. Don Quixote, I need a lady. What's a knight without a lady? A lady, it's like a tree without leaves. We had passed a country girl once, and a country girl, of course he knew a country girl, she would have to work and sweat and maybe spit here and there. But all he needed was a name, and that would change, and the name came right away, Dulcinea. It was musical. Dulcinea! And in his mind now, she was noble and beautiful. Dulcinea! All he needed was a squire, so he got on Rosinante with his armor, and he rode to his neighbor Sancho Panza. Now, Don Quixote was tall, and he was lean, and Sancho Panza was small, and he was round. And Don Quixote, he said, Sancho, I am now Don Quixote. I am a knight, and I am going out on knight errantry to do good in the world. You can be my squire. And Sancho said, where would we sleep? We'd sleep in castles. I don't know of any castles. Will we sleep under the stars? What will we eat? It doesn't matter for a knight what you eat. Well, it matters to the squire. I think I will not go. I'm sorry, Your Grace. Sancho, if you had read the books of chivalry, you would know that in 6 days I may defeat a whole kingdom. And you will be governor of the islands of the kingdom. You think? Yes, I do. It's even possible, Sancho, I'll defeat a small kingdom. You'll be king. My wife would be queen. Your wife would be queen. She would not be a good queen. But she'd be a good duchess. I will go. So Sancho got onto his donkey Dapple and followed Don Quixote, and they went out in the night so his niece could not say he was a madman and get someone to stop them. And say they rode, and one day Sancho, as usual, reaching in for some bread, and he was looking at the windmills, 30 or 40 windmills and the sails turning. And Don Quixote said, Sancho, our first great adventure. Look at the monsters. 30 or 40 giants. Where, Your Grace? Where are they, Your Grace? Where are they? There, Sancho. Oh, no, Your Grace. No, those are windmills. No, those are not arms of giants. No. You see with the eyes of fear, Sancho. I see with the eyes of a knight, and he rode forward. Sancho said, no, I swear on my wife's mustache, they are. But it was too late. He was riding forward, saying, you cowards, there was one knight against all of you. And he sunk his lance into the sail just as it turned, and Don Quixote was flung and landed with a tremendous clang, and he was injured. And Sancho, he came over, I told you, Grace, I told you. Oh, you hurt, Your Grace, I told you they were windmills. No, Sancho. Without windmills, they were turned in the last second by an enchanter. I didn't see him. You don't see enchanters, Sancho. At the last second, he turned them into windmills. Well, you're hurt, sir. You get up on the Rosinante. Try to sit up straight, Grace. Sit up straight, Your Grace. Sancho got on Dapple, and he reached in for some bread, salted bread, with green olives and Manchego cheese and dark red wine from a goatskin bota. And he thought, well, being a squire is strange, but I think that I'd like it. So, Laura, I said, that's an episode. What do you think? Want me to tell you one more? You may tell me two. Oh, great, great. Okay, Laura, okay, what I'll tell you. I'll tell you. Does it just give you a sense of the wildness, the excitement of the book? All right, we'll call this the inn he thought was a castle. So one day, they ride into a courtyard of an inn, and Don Quixote is draped over Rocinante. He had been in a misadventure, all beat up. Well, in the courtyard, there were a number of cheerful men. They were woolen merchants and needle makers, and there was a carrier. A carrier, someone who has a dozen donkeys and carries different goods. And they were all looking at Don Quixote in his armor draped over Rocinante. And the landlady took pity on him, and she said to Sancho, bring him up all the way to the top. We call it the loft. The bed is very poor, but I will come up and try to help in a minute. So Sancho brought Don Quixote up, and he took off the armor, and the bed was just 4 boards and a trestle about a foot high, and a poor blanket in Sancho's bed, and the carrier had the bed over there. He carried blankets, so he had a very fine bed. Well, the landlady came up, and she had some linen that she had put in hot water, and she put it on Don Quixote's shoulders. He was asleep. And the maid, Maritones was the maid. She said to Sancho, who is he? He is Don Quixote of La Mancha. He's a very great knight. He's afraid of nothing. And I am his squire. She said, what is a squire? Well, as a squire, I follow behind, he fights, and then I pick him off the dirt. But someday he's going to be a king, and I will be governor of Ireland. Just then Don Quixote, he managed to sit up, and he turned and said to the landlady, my dear lady, I am happy to be in your castle. Thank you. A knight must be modest, but if that were not true, I would tell you how fortunate you are to have me. Dear lady, I will never forget your kindness. Well, she liked Don Quixote, so that night she brought supper up, and then it was silent. Everyone was sleeping. Now, in the loft, Sancho was asleep, and the dog. But the carrier was wide awake. He was waiting for Maritones, the maid, who said she would meet him. And Don Quixote was wide awake because he had seen Maritones smile and thought, she is a princess and she's in love with me, and I can understand that. But I will have to disappoint her. And Maritones, she came into the darkness, and she went by Don Quixote, and he reached out, dear lady, please. He kissed her hand, please sit. I'm afraid my heart is given to Dulcinea, but you are a very beautiful lady. Now, Maritones had very heavy shoulders, and she had a squint, and her breath was like onions and rotten eggs. But to Don Quixote, it was perfume. He went on about how fine she was and how disappointed she must be. And the carrier got up, and in the dark he heard all this, and he gave a tremendous blow to Don Quixote right in the jaw, and Don Quixote went into a faint. Well, then, down below, the innkeeper thought Maritones is causing trouble again. Maritones, he ran up and said, Maritones. Maritones got up, and she fell over Sancho. And Sancho thought it was a nightmare, and he hit her in the face, so she hit him right in the nose. And the carrier went over, and he hit Sancho. And then the innkeeper went, and he jumped, and 4 of them were rolling and shouting and scratching. And down below, there was an officer of the law. He heard this, he grabbed his lantern, he came running up, and they were all fighting, but he came in and saw someone so still, he thought maybe he's dead. Yes, he's dead. He thought, Don Quixote dead. Murder! He said, murder! Nobody move! Murder! Silence! And the innkeeper, he snuck around and went down, and Maritones hid in the dark. And then Don Quixote sat up and said to the officer of the law, I need some balsam. It's an elixir for me. It's an elixir you make with wine and rosemary and salt. Get it right away. The officer of the law thought he was very important. I am not your servant. Get it right away. The officer of the law hit Don Quixote over the head with his lantern. Poor Don Quixote. Well, Sancho made the balsam, and finally Don Quixote got some sleep. And in the morning, the landlady came up, and Don Quixote was in his armor. She said, "This cape belonged to my grandfather. It is for you. You're a great knight." So Don Quixote went down into the courtyard. He was on Rocinante with his armor and his cape. And he said to the landlord, "Goodbye, thank you." The landlord said, "Wait, you haven't paid." "I don't pay in a castle, you fool. I am a knight." And he left, and Sancho was still there. So the innkeeper said, "Close the gates, close the gates." Poor Sancho was on Dapple the donkey, and lots of the innkeeper's friends were around, woolen merchants, needle makers. They were merry fellows, and they pulled poor Sancho off Dapple, put him in a blanket, and they threw him in the air. 1, 2, 3. Whoa! 1, 2, 3. Whoa! Don Quixote was riding away here at Sancho. And he turned, he couldn't get in. The gates, the walls are too high, so Sancho up there. They threw him up, and finally, they got tired, and they let Sancho go, and he rode out and said, "Your Grace, I want to go back to the village. There was no enchantment. There was me up there, Your Grace." "Sancho, my friend, there are storms in life, but then, Sancho, the sun comes up, and you will be governor of islands." "All right, I will go. I want some cheese." "So, Laura, that's another. One more, Laura, one more." You get some sense of how at least Sancho is changing. The wind was strange. And it was completely dark. They could see no stars. They could see nothing. Don Quixote was leading Rocinante in the darkness, and Sancho was behind. They thought they were in a meadow, and then they were probably going through some trees because they could hear the leaves rustling, but it was an alarming sound. And then they heard a loud sound. Perhaps they thought it's a great waterfall. Water, that would be good. So they went forward in the dark, and then they heard these regular blows. And they struck terror in Sancho's heart. It was the wind and the sound, the waterfall, but those regular blows, bam, 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 bam. What could it be? Sancho was so terrified his stomach hurt, and he watched Don Quixote get on the Rocinante and have his lance. "No, you can't go, Your Grace, it's dark. Please, I would die of fright. Please, Your Grace, don't go." "Sancho, I was born in the Iron Age to bring back the Golden Age. I will face this peril. Oh, please, Your Grace, please." He prayed, he cried, but nothing worked. Don Quixote said, "Tighten the girths of Rocinante, and I will go." Well, Sancho had tried everything, so now he used his ingenuity. He tightened the girth, but then he got a rope from Dapple, and he tied the front legs of Rocinante together. And Don Quixote said, "If I'm not back in 3 days, tell Dulcinea I have died facing a great peril. Goodbye, Sancho." And Rocinante hopped forward 6 inches. "Goodbye, Sancho." Hopped forward another. "Goodbye, Sancho." Don Quixote was frustrated. "Your Grace, my prayers have been answered. That's all. We will wait till dawn, Your Grace. Your Grace." All the while, this regular blow. Boom, 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 boom. And Sancho was so frightened, he said, "Your Grace, let me tell you a story. Your Grace, once upon a time, Your Grace, when some people were good and some people were not good, there was a shepherd boy. He was a goat herder, but I call him goat herder or shepherd boy, either one, goat herder, shepherd boy. So he had 300 goats, this shepherd boy, goat herder, and he was in love with a shepherdess. So this goat herder, "Don't repeat everything, Sancho. Say it one time, otherwise you'll be here all night telling the beginning. I have to tell it as I'm going to tell it." So anyway, this goat herder, shepherd I call him, all right? Well, the devil, he caused a jangle, so he made the two lovers jealous of one another, all right? So the goat herder, all right, He said, "I have nothing to do with her." So he's driving his 300 goats, all right? He's going to go to Portugal, but he can't get across the river. How can he get across the river? "I don't know, Sancho. You tell the story." "Well, Your Grace, there's no ferry. He has to get 300 goats across. Oh, there's a little fisherman. He gets a little fisherman, and the fisherman helps. He puts one goat in, and the fisherman rows the goat across. Then he comes back, he rows another goat across. Rows another goat, keep track of the number. And then he rows another goat, another goat. Sancho, just imagine they're all over. I can't do that, I can't do that. So he gets another one across. How many are across? "I don't know, Sancho." "You don't know? You didn't keep track?" "I didn't keep track." "Well, I can't tell the story." "Why can't you tell the story?" "Because you couldn't keep track." "No, I forgot the story." "Sancho, that's the strangest story I've ever heard in my life." And so the night went like that. All the while, these blows, bum, bum, all the while, such terror keeps coming back to Sancho, but now it's almost light, so he unties Rosinante's legs. Don Quixote realizes Rosinante could go forward and they could find out what this terror is, this great peril. They rode forward and then they came to a great waterfall. And pum, 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 pum. Around the corner they would see what this awful monster was. They rode around and there was a great old wooden building and the monster was inside. Bum, 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 bum. They got close and they could look in the window and what the monster was these great hammers coming down on cloth. Bum, 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 bum. Don Quixote was dumbfounded. He looked at Sancho and Sancho was smiling. And Sancho burst into laughter. "Your Grace, Your Grace, you were born in the Iron Age to bring the Golden Age. You will face any peril, even looking at these hammers, Your Grace." Don Quixote realized Sancho was making fun of him. So he lifted up his lance. "No, Your Grace, no, I'm sorry, Your Grace. But it was funny. We were terrified. Well, I was all night. And what is it? Nothing at all. This will be a good story." "No, Sancho. People will take it the wrong way. You may tell the story about the goats." "Oh, good, Your Grace." So he took another goat. "Not now, Sancho, not now." So I said, "What do you think, Laura? It just gives you a little feel." She said, "Wait a second, Daddy, I have one question." She ran down, got a peanut butter sandwich. I was looking at her books, Marshfield, middle school. She came up and she said, "One question. He always gets beat up. Does he ever win?" "All right, I'll just tell you one time. Now you have to read the book. Sancho does become governor, and there are these wild stories. But I'll tell you about one time. So Sancho, after many adventures, and Don Quixote go back to the village. But it's kind of a rest time. And the niece, she is saying to her friends, "He is mad, he is crazy. We've got to stop him." And she talks to a friend, Samson Carrasco. He's young and he's strong and he's full of himself and he has the perfect plan. He says, "I will take care of your uncle. What I will do is I will become the Knight of Mirrors. I will find some armor and I will have a squire, Thomas. I know. He knows Thomas, but I will have a wonderful disguise. I know what it is. And one day I will say, 'Don Quixote, I challenge you to combat.' And he will accept, and I will defeat him. And I'll put my sword in his throat and say, 'Now I have defeated you, Don Quixote. The laws of chivalry require that you obey me. You are to go back to your village.'" And so it was. One day, Don Quixote, Sancho, they were out on their adventures, and Don Quixote turned, and there was a knight coming with a squire. And the squire had the most enormous nose. It was half as big as his body. And the knight said, "Don Quixote, I am the Knight of Mirrors." Sancho, Carrasco. He had his armor on, and he had a surcoat, a golden surcoat, with little discs of glass that looked like mirror. "I challenge you to combat. You do not have to fight if you agree that my lady is fairer than yours." "No, I will fight," said Don Quixote. And so the Knight of Mirrors turned. He was going to then turn and ride forward. But as he was turning and riding away, Sancho ran over and said, "Your Grace, help me up the tree. You're afraid. Yes, I'm afraid. Look at the size of that nose. Please, your grace. I would be afraid too if I were not myself. So Don Quixote helped him. Now the Knight of Mirrors turned to charge. He was galloping forward, and he saw, Don Quixote was helping Sancho. So he waited, and his horse was a lazy horse who had no intention of moving again. In the meantime, Don Quixote, in his imagination, imagined the Knight of Mirrors was flying towards him. So Don Quixote rode forward, and he unhorsed the Knight of Mirrors. He triumphed, and he put his sword and said, "Now, Knight of Mirrors, do you admit my lady is 1,000 times fairer than yours?" I admit, said the Knight of Mirrors. And Don Quixote let them go both. And right after that, there was another triumph for the great lion. But, Laura, Samson Carrasco was young and strong and angry. So there was a second combat. And this time, Don Quixote was unhorsed. And the Knight of Mirrors said, "Now, Don Quixote, I am the victor. You must do what I say. You must go to your village." And so he did with Sancho. And Don Quixote went into a fever. And when he woke after several days, he said, "This was foolishness. I am Quixote the Good. I'm not Don Quixote. It was so foolish." His niece was there. Sancho was there. And there was no life in his face. "No, sir, you are Don Quixote. We'll go out together." "No, Sancho, I'm not Don Quixote. It was foolishness, all of it. It was folly. And he died. And now every village in La Mancha claims Don Quixote for their own. I said, "What do you think, Laura?" She said, "Well, kind of sad, but I got more homework to do." Well, I had tried. So the next morning, I'm headed down the stairs, and Laura's about to go out the door. "Hey, Laura, school bus a little early?" She turned, and she was wearing gray slacks and black turtleneck, a silver vest, and a cape. She said, "No, I'm going on Rosinante." She opened the door, and she was off. Donna Laura of Marshfield.
So we left Montag on the run, followed by the hound. Faber in his ear, "What's happening, Montag?" "It's the hound." Captain Beatty said the hound always gets his man. "It's no use. Don't give up. Don't give up, Montag. Get to my house, your house. If I come to your house, they'll kill you. They killed Clarice. They'll kill you. It's better that I die here." "No, get to my house. I have a plan." "A plan? I'm anxious to hear it. Get to my house." Well, Montag darted through the back alleys and backyards, and everywhere he went, he saw on the screens himself, followed by the hound with helicopters hovering. Millions of people were watching him. The whole country was watching him. "Enemy at loose. Please report all unusual circumstances." In due time, he got somehow to Faber's house. The old professor let him in. Come in, quick. Over here. There was a huge pile of musty, sweaty, smelly socks and underwear and sweatshirts. "I'm a widower, I'm an English professor, I don't do laundry." "It's going to save you, Montag. Change your clothes, put these on. I'll use these. I'll wipe everything you've touched with dirty socks. I'll turn the sprinkler on. It'll confuse the scent." "Maybe it'll work," said Montag. He was so grateful to be there with a friend, so grateful just to have a moment to rest. Faber was back and forth, bringing more clothes, getting a suitcase for Montag to take with him. Meanwhile, Montag looked around. There's workbenches everywhere and electric devices and more of those little beans and celluloid and springs. How'd you get all this stuff? How'd you afford all this stuff? You lost your position at Princeton. Ah, said Faber, the stock market. The last refuge of the dangerous intellectual out of work. Now, get dressed and go. I'll put the sprinklers on. Montag was out the door again. Faber in his ear. Now, as soon as you get a chance, head for the river. Head for the river. Get in the river. It'll be hard to find your scent in the river. Don't forget to put all my clothes on. Get rid of your clothes, put them in the suitcase, let them float down the river. Let them float ahead of you. It'll confuse the hound. Good luck. Every house he passed, he saw himself running and running and running, and the hound getting closer, the hound bounding like a stag, 4 legs and then in the air, vapor coming out of his nose, that proboscis with the needle, in and out, in and out. Finally, he heard on the screens, everyone out of their house. We will count to 10, then everyone out of their house. Report anything you see. 1 million people coming out of their house. They'll find me. The town ran harder and harder, and finally, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1 million doors open. Montag leapt into the river. And the river carried him downstream, and he looked up, and there was the moon. And he thought, after years on land and years with the fire of the sun, this is where I belong, in the shadows at night under the moon. Good, good, said Faber. You're in the river. Good. The helicopters are turning back. I think the hound is confused. You're going to be all right. Now, you'll float for about an hour and a half. It'll get shallow. When it gets shallow, get out, look for an old railroad track, an old stub of the railway. Follow the railroad track and you'll find them. You'll find the camp, you'll find the book people. Montag came to that place where the rapids allowed him to get his feet and begin to move out of the river. And that's when he saw it in the moonlight, the 2 fiery eyes. And he moaned. He let out a terrible moan that all of it came to this, that after all of this, now the hound would have him. And he had done what he had to do. But at that moment, there was an explosion of sound and leaves, and a great white tail of the deer came up and disappeared in the moon shadows. He made his way through the forest, and he stubbed something. It was the track. It was the railroad track, and he followed the railroad track, and he followed the railroad track, and there was a light, a distant light, a campfire, and he came closer, afraid to move closer to it, but afraid not to move toward it. And finally, he was at the edge of a clearing, and one of the men looked up. Come on out. We know you're out there. Come on out. You're welcome here. Montag moved toward the men and women around the fire. We've been watching. How, he said. He pointed to a small battery-operated television. They're about to catch you. Catch me. Look, watch. They found a stand-in. People will only watch these things for so long. They needed to end it, make it clean, crisp, just like fires. Some poor soul out walking. The police know about these strange types walking at night, and they use them when they have to. They won't show his face real clearly. Look, there he is. And on the TV, they could hear the announcer, they found him, Montag. Look, he's running. And the helicopters came in, and then the hound, the great hound with the vapor coming out of his nose, the great hound with the red eyes sprang, and in a spider grip enveloped the man, screaming, and then it went black. And the voice said, the threat is over. The enemy of the state is killed. Montag is gone. Back to our usual programming. Montag took a deep breath and looked around. I have some folks to introduce you to. Over here, the short fellow with the mustache. He's Walden Pond. And on his right, The fellow with the dribble there, with the soup and the chili down his front, that's Plato's Republic. Don't judge a book by its cover. But I don't belong. I don't belong. I had some books. I've lost them. I might have some of Ecclesiastics. What do you mean you might have some Ecclesiastics? Here in my head, perfect. Perfect. I'll guide you myself. My name's Granger. I'm the leader of this bunch. Simon, do we have another Ecclesiastics? Yeah, there's a fellow in Youngstown, Ohio. He's Ecclesiastics. Is that all? That's it. See, Montag? You're one of 2 Ecclesiastics. See how important you've gotten in the last minute? You'll do fine. We have figured out. We have worked it out. We've been able to get rid of the blocks that we all have in our head from all the nonsense, all the manipulators, all the broadcasters and exploiters and hand-pumping media that has fed us all the years. We've got rid of all those things, and now the brain can remember everything. Just hearing it once, you'll be fine. And we'll remember. And when the time comes, they'll call us all in, and we'll put the books back in print. We'll recite the books, Montag. You can stay here with us. And when I read the book, I thought, Ray, that would be a good place to stop. But Ray just never stops. So there's a little bit more, and I'll tell you about that later on. So this book is filled with hope. That the mind, the imagination, the ability to take what's in books will always be preserved in some way. And of course, Don Quixote was full of hope. In the story of Scheherazade of 1001 Arabian Nights, I find one of the most hopeful stories of all. Now, I'm ashamed to admit that until recently I thought 1001 Arabian Nights were pretty much 1001 fellows dressed up in armor, kind of like Don Quixote. But no, Scheherazade was the daughter of a close advisor, a caliph, close advisor to the Sultan, and Sultan was an evil man, a serial killer, murderer, rapist. And because he was betrayed by his wife, he would marry a young woman, sleep with her that night, and kill her at the end of their lovemaking. Because he was betrayed by his wife, I mean, get over it. But he was a monster, and all the young women in the kingdom were dying, and Scheherazade, she was the Ray Bradbury, she was the Clarice McClellan. She knew all the stories, all the folklore, all the poetry, all the writings of this great, rich Persian culture. And she would tell her sister these stories, and she went to her father and said, I will marry the Sultan to save my sister because I believe that she is next. And she did just that. And on the wedding night, she asked the Sultan if she could tell a story to her sister, a bedtime story, as she did every night. And the Sultan said, very well, very well. And she began the story, and the Sultan overheard. And he busied himself in the corner for a while, but he drew himself closer. And pretty soon he was completely enraptured by the story. And then Scheherazade, toward the very end, said, I'm tired, I don't think I remember. I'll finish the story tomorrow if you let me live one more day. And he did, and then the next day, she started a new story. And she said, if you let me live one more day, if I have one more night of storytelling, I'll finish the story. And the next night, it was one more night, until there was 1001 Arabian Nights of storytelling. And after hearing those 1001 stories, his heart was changed, and he became a good man and a kind and compassionate ruler. So in this world, I believe Bradbury would have loved to have this story told right here tonight in honor of him, because we can't go much longer in our civilization by just finding the demons and killing them and thinking somehow that's going to make it right. We have to find the goodness in the demons, and perhaps the demons in us, and the two maybe can come together in some way. So we have one of Scheherazade's stories, one of those very stories that the Sultan might have heard that kept her alive one more night, told by another one of the book people. another one of the book people, Megan Wells. Megan Wells has been the artistic director and the guide of this event now for 7 years. And she is well equipped for that duty. Some years ago, she received a Jefferson Award, the highest award given in Chicago theater. And she received that award for direction. She's also artist in residence, storyteller in residence with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. She also will be telling Bram Stoker's Dracula Sunday afternoon at the Woodstock Opera House, a wonderful place also to hear one of the book people. So I'm looking for her, and I think she's there, and I hope she's there. Megan Wells, please welcome her.
My king, shall I tell you another story? Said Scheherazade. Once in a certain town of Persia, there were 2 brothers. The eldest brother was named Qasim, and the younger brother was named Ali Baba. And when their father met his demise, faring to the compassionate and almighty Allah, the father's wealth was divided equally to the 2 sons, and they both wasted no time in spending it all. So, when Qasim, the eldest, discovered that his pockets were empty, he wept. For 40 days he wept, and then he decided that he must have more of it. So he aimed a charm upon a rich merchant until he earned the right to marry his only daughter, Basma, thereby gaining the family shop. But when the younger brother, Ali Baba, found his pockets empty, he laughed. For 40 days he laughed, and then he married his one true love, Kalila, who was the daughter of the woodcutter, and so he took on that trade, taking his donkeys every day for the long walk into the woods to fetch back the kindling and the wood for the household fires. Now on this day, same as every other day, Ali Baba would water his donkeys there at the marketplace fountain, and he could spy Morgiana, his brother's young slave. Standing this day, her arms filled with goods, stone still, staring at the merchant's daughters there gathered about the silk booth, cooing and laughing over all the fine silks that they wrapped about their waists and their arms as if they were dancing for lovers. Each day Morgiana went to the market to buy the salt and the meat and the wine and the cheese and the bread and all the necessaries for her master and his unpleasable wife, while the rich girls came down to the marketplace for joy with money from their fathers. Living fathers. Morgiana had a living father once. When she was a young child, she'd been on a trading caravan with her family, and the caravan had been attacked by marauding bandits, 40 marauding bandits, and Morgiana's mother had taken the father's dagger after he was dead, good dead, and taken the child and hid it there in the last wagon there among the salt sacks and the animal feed. Morgiana. And the bandits killed her too. It was gypsies that found the Morgiana, and so she was raised for many years in the wild until she blossomed, and then she fetched a good price in the slave market. Qasim bought her, and Morgiana told him the story of her family, but as she'd been with the gypsies, Qasim didn't believe her and turned her into a kitchen slave. But he ever cajoled her to dance for him. Morgiana, if you dance for me, you will no longer have to be a slave in the kitchen. No, said Morgiana. Better to be in the kitchen. I will never dance for Kasim, she vowed to herself. But she had one happiness in the household. For Kasim's youngest son, Arif, was beautiful and she was a slave. And so she had no hope there. And thinking about the past gave her no strength for surviving. So she dashed these memories, turned away from the giggling girls, and brought her goods back up the hill, passing her master's shop where Arif was surrounded by merchants. It was purchasing day. Lining the road were camels and donkeys and wagons loaded with all the exotic goods from all the corners of the traveled world. Gold, thought Morgiana. What good is gold? It only brings thieves. Now, in the woods, Ali Baba was fetching up his wood, and then he heard the sound of horses coming from a distance, and then a cry, "To the cave!" He didn't understand the words, but he had the fear of bandits in him in a rush, and so he shoed his donkeys deeply into the bushes, and he hied up the closest tree, there, the one by the great cliff face, and then the bandits came, and stopped there by the rock. From his tree perch, Ali Baba counted them as they pulled their heavy saddlebags off their sweating beasts, and he could see the glimmering gold, and he knew true that these were the bandits and the highwaymen. The leader walked to the rock face, and Ali Baba could not see his face, but he watched him lift his black gloved hand. Oh. Open, Sim Sim! And the rumbling rock did so. And then the 39 bandits followed their leader into a cave, and then the rock rumbled close. What magic is this, thought Ali Baba, but he dared not move, and after a length of time, the rock rumbled open again, and out they came and put their empty saddlebags onto their horses to go and fill them again, and the moment he was sure they were gone, Ali Baba whistled to his loyal donkeys, scrambled down that tree, and made to flee the sea. But that the cave beguiled him. So he lifted his hand. Oh, open, Sim Sim. And the magical rock was obedient to those words. Ali Baba entered the lair, and the moment his body passed the entrance, the cave door rumbled closed of its own accord behind him. But there were holes in the ceiling hewn in that vast cavern, and it glittered upon. Ali Baba could not fathom how many generations of thievery had amassed this great fortune of silks and brocades and vases and swords and rugs and jewels and silver rivers and hills of gold. But he kept his wits and he moved quickly, using those enchanted words, in and out, with his donkey's saddlebags. Only gold, just take some of the gold. He did so, and when it was done, he covered the gold with the wood that he had collected, and then lifted up his hand more assuredly and said, "Oh, close, Sim Sim," and it did. Now, Ali Baba's wife was amazed as Ali Baba poured out his saddlebags of golden asharifs, those ancient kingly coins. Oh, Ali Baba, shh, Kalila. We must not tell anyone. No. No, I have taken very little, and it will not be missed as long as we keep our secret. Yes, Ali Baba. Oh, and then he began to put the gold back into the saddlebags. I will bury it in the yard. Oh, Ali Baba, no, we should count it before you bury it so we can plan. No, Kalila, there's no time. No, I will run to your brother and of Basima. I will borrow the measure, the scales, and we will weigh it. And I will be gone and back by the time you dig the holes. And she covered her hair, and she went out into the night air, and it was Morgiana who answered the door at Kasim's house. And Basima pulled Morgiana aside privately and said, Morgiana, put a little bit of wax and suet on the bottom of the scales so that we can find out what it is that Ali Baba's wife measures. Yes. And so innocent Kalila borrowed the weights and brought them and quickly measured and measured and measured and measured and measured and measured and measured all of this gold. And then Ali Baba went and buried it, and then she brought back the scales. Well, Morgiana listened at the door while Kalila was betrayed by her own sister-in-law to her husband. Kasim! Ali Baba is richer than you. He pretends to be poor. He weighs his gold, whereas you only count yours. Kasim went immediately to Ali Baba's house and wrested from his younger brother the whole secret of the cave and the magical incantation. And before the first light of dawn the next morning, he took 10 donkeys with him to the cave for his own share. Oh, open, sim. He did delay and lost his wits. So that the thieves found him there. And they slew him with their sabers and then quartered his body. And then they hung his body 2 parts on either side of the door on the inside as a warning to intruders. When Kasim did not return at all that night, Basima feared. And on the next afternoon, when 5 of the donkeys came back without their master, Basima ran to Ali Baba and told him everything. And Ali Baba feared the worst, but he waited until the cover of the night to go once more to that enchanted rock. Oh, open, sim, and the rumbling rock opened, and inside Ali Baba found his brother. Morgiana woke and slipped her hand underneath her pillow to get her father's protecting dagger. Morgiana, it's Ali Baba. Come to the stable. Come alone. I have my brother. Inside the stable, Ali Baba trusted Morgiana with the whole story. But Morgiana, when the thieves, they come to their lair and they find that the body is gone, they will know that someone living holds their secret. But Morgiana, I could not leave my brother's body there. How many thieves did you say, Ali Baba? 40. A leader and 39. And Morgiana was silent for a long moment. Ali Baba, then no one must know how Qasim was murdered, or else they will come and they will murder us too. And Ali Baba said, yes, I know. And Morgiana said, I will put it out that he is sick. Yes, I will run to the druggist and I will ask for medicine for a dangerous distemper. Sure, it was purchasing day, and so some of the suppliers could have brought a contagion. Yes, I will give out that word in the market to all the slaves tomorrow, and then tomorrow night I will go back to the druggist and I will beg of him the opium that eases life's last breath, and then Basima and I will weep. Morgiana, you are uncanny wise for one so young. I have seen much. Oh, but the body, Morgiana. We cannot bury my brother in 4 parts. The cobbler, Baba Mustafa. He opens early and closes late. Yes, I know the cobbler, Baba Mustafa. I will go to him, and I will ask him to make a funeral shroud, and then I will bring him here, and you may give him gold to sew your brother. Oh, said Ali Baba, but you must blindfold him. Yes, I will do all that you say. And she did, and they did, just exactly as they planned. After 40 days passed from the funeral procession, according to the laws of the Prophet, Ali Baba left his own house, bringing his wife and his goods to take over the household of his brother, including his brother's wife, and to make her content, he gave to Arif, the youngest son, the duty of the shop. And for 40 days and 40 nights, 40 thieves listened for gossip and searched for an omen, some sign of a quartered man. And they found it not until, at last, one of them happened upon Baba Mustafa. Oh, cobbler, you hold the leather so close to your face when you sew. Sure, you'll have no livelihood when your eyes fail. No honest livelihood, said Baba Mustafa. Not all livelihoods are honest, said the bandit, feeling his dagger. True, said Baba Mustafa. Not all that I've done is honest either. Why, just last month, I sewed together a body of a murdered man. Ah, said the bandit, putting gold coins in Baba Mustafa's hand. And how many parts was this bandit? 4, said Baba Mustafa. More gold into his hand. Can you take me to this place? No, I was blindfolded. It took a whole bag till Baba Mustafa confessed. Ah, but I have such a good nose. Ali Baba and Arif were sitting in the courtyard after the meal when the boy slave Abdullah came running in, announcing, there is a merchant, Master Ali, there is a merchant who has come. He is outside. He has 20 donkeys and 2 barrels. By the stain, I think it is oil. And Arif leapt from his seat, saying, oh, I had sent word through the suppliers that I was in need. Mustard oil, I hope. And so Ali Baba accompanied Arif outside to meet the merchant. Yes, I had heard you were in need of the oil of my specialty, but alas, I am embarrassed. I have made no arrangements for sleeping. Oh, laughed Ali Baba, you will stay here. Come in, you will stay in my household. Abdullah, Morgiana, we have a guest. prepare for our guest. And Arif, you will help me. We will help you to unload your barrels into the safety of the garden out by the stables. And the merchant said, no, no, no. You are ahead of me in hospitality. Do not add to my debt. And he bowed elegantly with a black-gloved hand. I will see to my barrels myself. And it seemed to Morgiana, as she was passing by, that as the merchant unloaded his barrels, he seemed to whisper to each one, and then all were retired, and the guest was retired, and the lamps went out. Oh, Morgiana, we are out of oil, and Abdullah happily chimed in. Oh, but the merchant brought 40 barrels. Yes, said Morgiana, and she went out to get some mustard oil. The moment she got close to that first barrel, a man's voice came within. Captain, is it time? Oh, how swift was Morgiana's mind. She counted the barrels. Ali Baba has no sense for faces. This is our enemy. Brought his bandits here to slaughter us while we sleep. No, it is not time. The slave girl suspects us. Everything I told you before is not. Do not come out of the barrel until you hear your name. As no one else but I knows your name, it will be a very safe. Yes, Captain. Everything I told you is not. The slave girl suspects us. On and on to each barrel. 39 barrels said, yes, Captain. But the 40th barrel didn't say anything because it was indeed filled with mustard oil. So Morgiana rolled the mustard oil into the kitchen, and she set Abdullah to the task of refilling all the oil lamps, for she knew the captain of the bandits would not dare to wake while the slaves still tarried awake. And while Abdullah was busy, she snuck away to her former master's private storage, his own collection of bewitchments and poisons, and from those she got that curare poison from Africa, a black paste, and fortune. The gypsies had taught her well. A binding cord from the druids of the Celtic Isles. And hied she back to the kitchen, and she emptied that paste into the kettle, careful not to let that paralyzing poison touch her skin. And then she filled that with oil, and then she set that upon the flame, humming the whole time, so the captain would still be trapped in his room. And when it was almost to a boil, she called now to Abdullah, 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 in our haste I have forgotten to bring water to the guests' donkeys. You must go to the stables and water the donkeys. Yes, Morgiana. And Abdullah went to the stable, and of course the donkeys, ee-haw, 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 braying such a noise. To cover what she did next. Swiftly, she took that binding cord, she wrapped it around the first barrel, and then she wrapped it around each of those 39 barrels. And as she did so, she thought to herself, this is the 40 thieves who murdered my family and now intend to kill this. But for the captain, we'll have to wait for another time until all of the barrels were tied each to the other. And then she was back at the first barrel, and she tied the end of that binding cord on the ring finger of her left hand, and the other end of that that binding cord to the ring finger of right hand. So now, by magic, all that she did with these avenging hands to this first barrel would be mirrored in every other one. For my father and my family, she said. And she pulled the plug of the first barrel, and all the other plugs popped. And then she took that boiling poison, and she poured it in. And in all the other barrels, each bandit suffered the fate of the first. The death was swift and mostly silent. And then she had kettle in her hand, and she quick pulled up that binding cord as Abdullah went on into the house, and she went into the kitchen, and she hid in the shadows, and she watched and she waited, and sure enough, the captain of the bandits came out from his room, and he went out into the garden to wake his men, to rouse them to murder, but he found them all dead. And looking about with wild eyes, he abandoned his plot and fled over the garden wall. A whole year passed, and no threats passed the threshold of Ali Baba's household. And so the two wives, Khalila and Basima, began to plan a marriage. Arif is of age now, and there are many good families that we should be considering. Ali said yes. He was reluctant. He was fond of his nephew. And he didn't want to set him so soon apart in a household of his own. Oh, he thought if only Khwaja Hassan had a daughter. Khwaja Hassan, newest merchant in our village. Why, he arrived, was it a year already? Hasn't he befriended our Arif? And his wealth seems to be never-ending. Just then, Arif arrived into the house saying, Uncle, Khwaja Hassan has accepted our invitation. Oh, said Ali Baba. He's coming to our house. He's coming to our house. Uncle, can you imagine Khwaja Hassan in our own house? Morgiana Abdullah, we will have a great feast. Tell your aunt and your mother to dress in their finest. We shall have Khwaja Hassan. Oh, but Uncle, there is one thing. He said that he cannot eat any salt in the bread or in the meat. And he asked that we not take offense at this breach in hospitality. It's something to do with his facial scars, I think. A disfiguring fire, though he never speaks of it. Morgiana did not suspect a thing, though the breach in hospitality over the salt troubled her mind as she prepared the meal, and so it was. When it was time to bring up the confections, she took the tray from Abdullah to bring the treats to the table herself, so she might look at this Khwaja Hassan, and passing him on her way out of the room, she noticed those scars were strange. They had little bits of flesh sticking out of his profuse beard and mustache, like glue. How swift was Morgiana's mind. The captain of the bandits bought a shop and has patiently won the trust of Arif so he could make his way here into our household. And he plans to be alone with the men, I know it. And when they drink large, he shall drink small, and then he shall slay them. No, she quieted her beating heart, which was racing as fast as her mind, and thought, I must have proof, or I will bring nothing but shame on us all. And then she heard a voice from her past. Qasim, Morgiana, dance for me. If you will dance for me, you will no longer be a kitchen slave. I vowed that I shall never dance for Qasim, but I may dance for his son Arif. And to save the life of my friend Ali Baba, Abdullah played and beat upon the tabla as Morgiana danced with her tambourine into the courtyard, and the flower-scented air filled that delicate night as the men sat in the courtyard drinking. Khwaja Hassan, the captain of the bandits, was sitting by the garden path to make his escape. So quick, thought Morgiana, no, stay my thoughts. I must have proof. And so she set aside the tambourine, and she reached from her gilded belt and pulled out her father's silver dagger with its shining curved blade, and she lifted it high over her head. And then she switched hands, and she lifted that high over her head. And then she brought that dagger here to her own breast, and then she passed the dagger from one hand to the other hand and back again until she had the dagger so safely in her nice, strong right hand. And then she lifted up the tambourine again, and she turned it over and danced over to Arif. Arif stood up and reached into his cloak and got out his purse and emptied the entire purse of gold into the tambourine. And Ali Baba, too, he laughed and he got up and he followed suit. He emptied his whole pile of gold there into her tambourine. And then she went over to Khwaja Hassan, and he saw what he must do. He reached for his purse of gold. Revealing the dagger that he had kept hidden against all laws of hospitality. Now Morgiana had both proof and opportunity, and so she took her father's silver dagger and she plunged it into the heart of the captain of the bandits. He crumpled to the ground. Arif and Ali cried in astonishment, and Morgiana simply held up her hand. She went to the table and she took the napkin and she dipped it into the bowl of water. And then she went over to the evildoer and she wiped the glue from his face. Oh, Morgiana, said Ali Baba, you have saved my life. You have saved my whole family. And Morgiana said more than this. I have avenged the death of my own. And then she told Ali Baba and Arif the whole story of her childhood and who her family was and all that had happened to her. And unlike Qasim, Ali Baba and Arif listened to every word and believed her. The wedding of Arif and Morgiana was sumptuous and overflowing with wine and joy. And that is how Arif, nephew of Ali Baba, son to Qasim, married for both love and money. For out of gratitude, Ali Baba gave to the brave and loyal Morgiana the enchanted words to a cave of unending treasures. Oh, open, sim sim.
Well, we are coming to the end, and we are going to finish this book. It's a lot thinner than Don Quixote. I encourage you to read it. Ray Bradbury loved Mexico. And I think of him as kind of a Baroque writer. In Mexico, I take a group to Oaxaca every year, and we are there at Christmas sometime. And you know, here when I grew up with manger scenes, there was a cow and a camel and a couple sheep. Well, in Mexico, if one cow is good or 2 camels are good, then 50 camels are even better. And Ray's writing is kind of like that. So you really have to read the book to get any sense of the breadth of it. But we will finish in just a moment, but first I want to thank a couple people. I mentioned that Megan was our artistic director. Well, she huddles every year with Elizabeth Stearns, who's our community director from the Waukegan Public Library, and the two of them put together this wonderful program every year. I will be sure to thank Elizabeth Stearns, our godmother, as well as Richard Lee and Raina Murrow, and all the folks from the library, David, that help out with this, make this thing possible, not just help out, that create it. And here on stage, we couldn't do this without Bill and the ever-important sound job, and Guy, one of our stage technicians here, and Mike, who put my bow tie on, and Mark, and Justin, who stirs the whole drink and keeps it all orchestrated. So we are very grateful for them. We were sitting having dinner at an unnamed hotel, a very nice hotel actually, and wondering if this dystopia that Bradbury describes could ever actually happen, you know. And then we realized that we were actually sitting, it's a modern decor at the hotel. Then we looked and we actually were sitting, having our dinner at a light table that was throbbing, changing colors from orange to violet and back to orange again. And then we looked to the right, and just not 4 feet from our Mushu pork was a 4x4 square foot head of Diane Sawyer, telling us about all the awful things that have happened today. Well, Don Quixote said that the impossible dreams are possible. Ray Bradbury took a grizzled, ambitious, heartless fireman, book burner, who he says enjoyed sometimes burning the book page by page and watching each of the pages like flower petals turn into curled black moths and dropping at his feet. He took that man and through story and love transformed him. And Scheherazade transformed a monster with 1,001 Nights of storytelling and love. Love, because Megan reminded me that 3 children were also born during those 3 years. So it wasn't only storytelling. I said to Megan, does that kind of spoil it? She said, no, that was love. That was connected to the feminine, to the life force. That makes it even better. And I think Bradbury would regret the fact that perhaps drones and machine guns have been substituted for stories and love, and we don't really know where that's going to end. But Ray Bradbury hints at the dilemma in the final pages of 451. They're around the campfire. He's with the book people, the hobos on the outside, libraries on the inside. And he's being oriented, and he's meeting more of them, and he's been told about the vast network. We're all over the country, said Granger. We're decentralized. We don't make any stir. We don't want to offend anybody. We're model citizens in a way. We can't, because if we're killed, that could be the end of it. A small village that'll never be bombed in Maryland. 27 people. That village is Bertrand Russell. Perhaps Granger senses a certain smugness around the group as he's saying these things. Because after he gives his heartfelt hope that someday they'll remember enough, they will remember enough that they will dig a huge hole, Granger says, and bury damn war in that hole. But in the book, the war comes. And Bradbury said, the war is over 45 seconds after the bombardier doors open. And the jets flying 600,000 miles an hour are already on the other side of the world when the city becomes like a great mass of baking powder. But the book people survive. But Granger says, we'll get the books back. But look what they did when they had the books. It came to this, even though they had the books. So Ray Bradbury, I think, says to us, it is up to us. It is up to us in the end. Thank you very much. I'm going to bring out J.L. Callahan and Megan Wells.